Hello, hello. I'm Morgan.
I'm Tuesday, and welcome back to the Naughty Girls podcast, the show that deep dives into early 2000s pop culture. This is part 2 of our Paris Hilton series, so if you haven't caught up on the last episode, check it out for our breakdown of Paris Hilton's rise to stardom and how she went from scandalous socialite to business tycoon.
Today we'll discuss her 2020 documentary, This is Paris, and re-examine her career and public image throughout the 2000s based on what it showed us about her personal life. I highly recommend you watch it on YouTube if you haven't already, and we've linked it in the show notes for you.
Right off the bat, we do want to let you know the documentary focuses on Paris revealing she was abused at a boarding school in her teens. It also looks at her work with Breaking Code Silence, which is a social movement organized by survivors of institutional child abuse.
We do want to provide a content warning here as we will be discussing this sensitive topic in detail. We've provided timestamps in the show notes if you'd like to skip past those parts. You'll also hear this sound before we get into it.
Now, before we jump right in, you know the drill. Let's get into our headlines of the week. Morgan, if you were a 2000 celebrity, what would the tabloid covers say about you right now?
Okay, so it would say Morgan's Girls Night Out.
Where did you go?
I went to the Justin Bieber concert this past weekend.
Oh my God.
And it was the best time. The teenage girl inside me was just ecstatic. So I went with my sister and it was really nice. We got to hang out. She came over. We got ready together. It was so much fun. It honestly felt like pre-pandemic. Everybody was just so happy to be there and everyone was singing and dancing. And it was just really nice to let loose. And that boy's got some bangers, let me tell you.
Can't disagree.
When Ghost came on, my body just took over. I couldn't help it. But yeah, no, so that was a really fun time on the weekend.
That's amazing. I can't remember the last time I went to a concert. I think it was November 2019. You know what I do remember? Running into you outside of a Justin Bieber concert back in 2010. You were with your cousin. I was with one of my friends. Do you remember that?
Yeah, every time he's come to the city, I've seen him, and no shame.
A true believer.
And I don't care. I'm 26 years old and love JB, so it's all good.
As you should.
Thank you. All right, so Tuesday, over to you now. What would the tabloid cover say about you this week?
It would say, Tuesday apologizes to Grimes. You know who Grimes is, right? Okay, so she's a very avant-garde musician from Canada. She's also more commonly known now as Elon Musk's baby mama. They have 2 babies together named like XYZ and ABC. I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah, so I was watching this interview with her a couple years ago where she said that she became severely malnourished because for 2 years while she was on tour, all she did was eat spaghetti every single day. And then her hair started falling out. She's like, I wonder why this is happening. And then she went to a doctor who was like, you can't eat spaghetti every day and not expect things not to happen to your body. So she's just saying this very candidly in her interview. And she's like, yeah. And then I almost died. I thought that was really funny. I laughed. Okay. I know that's also very traumatic to go through, but I just found it very amusing. I had a humbling reality check this past week. Had a terrible week. Okay. Last episode, I was not in my flop era. I'm back in it again. I was stressed. And when I'm stressed and in a bad headspace, I just don't take care of myself. And if I eat, I just end up eating the same thing every single day because it takes no energy, right? Realized I was fully in my Grimes moment. So Grimes, Claire, I am so sorry. I take my laugh back. I am no better than you. In fact, I am the same.
You have to share with all the listeners. What was that one?
No, I can't
meal?
say it. I can't say it, but it was very carb heavy.
Carbs are a girl's best friend. They just make you feel better. Some bread, some cookies. So good. So
People need to
comforting.
stop demonizing carbs.
Tell them. Let's start a petition.
Yes. This is the Naughty Girls podcast mantra. If you disagree, please stop listening. Well, on the topic of food, you guys, we're about to get into quite a conversation here. So go grab your snacks, grab your drinks, and sit back because we're about to start our episode.
Oh, mother dear, we're not the fortunate ones. And girls, they wanna have fun. Oh, girls just wanna have fun.
This is Paris was directed by filmmaker Alexandra Dean. So originally, a producer pitched her the idea to make a film about how Paris Hilton is the blueprint for influencer culture as we know it today. And according to Alexandra, she first met with Paris over a Zoom call to talk about it. Then she thought there was a side to her that the public hadn't seen yet.
She also says she'd heard Paris attended troubled teen boarding schools and wondered if she might suffer from trauma because her own sister went through a similar experience. but she didn't ask Paris about it right away.
Alexandra followed Paris around for 11 months to get a sense of who she really is. She says she'd noticed certain things Paris would do and say, and later ask her about them during quieter moments, some of which we do get to see in the film. And they developed a close relationship, with Alexandra saying Paris was a lot like her own sister, and that she herself apparently reminded Paris of her younger sister, Noughty Hilton.
The more trust that was gained between them, the more that Paris revealed about her time at boarding school and how it affected her present life. And that's what became the focus of the documentary. Paris finally opening up about her wounds and her real personality, which she hid from the public for so long.
The very beginning of the film would make you think it's an expose on the lives of celebrity influencers. There were brief cameos from people like Kim Kardashian, who said she wouldn't have the career she does today if not for Paris setting the precedent. And Paris was asked if she regrets contributing to the creation of influencer culture, and she says yes, that she feels like she helped create a monster.
There's also clips of Paris showing off her massive closets, decked out from floor to ceiling in jewelry and PR gifts that she says that she can't even keep track of. She jet sets from country to country, never takes vacation, and repeats a few times that her goal is to make $1 billion. And then when she does, she'll quote unquote finally be happy.
But then we see a clip of Paris unable to fall asleep in a hotel room one night, and then she explains she suffers from insomnia and has had the same recurring nightmare of being kidnapped ever since she was a teen. And that's when the real story starts to unravel.
Yes, I feel like this was the first time that we all saw the real Paris. She was vulnerable, and she gave us our first honest look into how she's been affected by long-term trauma. You could really feel her sadness and distress.
The documentary then seeks to understand who Paris is behind the facade. Why is she still so driven by materialism and money when she seemingly already has it all? And why is she so quick to shut people out from her problems? And it turns out pretty much everything stems from the fact she had a strained relationship with her family and that she was abused as a teen.
So for starters, Paris does get candid about the fact that she's been playing a character with her high-pitched voice and her ditzy personality. We talked about it in our last episode, how she invented the dumb blonde persona to market herself and propel herself into fame. She says it's second nature to her after years of hiding behind the act. But watching this documentary, I got the impression she's actually extremely down-to-earth and laid back.
Her family even described her as being a tomboy at heart and said all the glitz and glamour is just for show. That she created a persona so far from her true self in response to whatever she internalized around the age of 15. But her family also doesn't seem to understand why she did that. So of her family members, only her mom Kathy and sister Nikki agreed to participate in the documentary. And really, to nobody's surprise, the Hiltons are your typical elite Republican family, very conservative, and Paris and Nikki say their parents would sweep every problem under the rug, never talked about anything with each other, and I feel like you always see at least one wild child break out from that type of family.
Totally agree. Paris and her family all agree she was free-spirited and didn't care about keeping up appearances or fancy material things as a kid. If she felt misunderstood or unseen by her family, it makes sense why she'd act out and try to get their attention.
I also found it pretty revealing that when they asked Kathy Hilton about Paris's sex tape leak, that she only talked about how it affected her. Like, she said she couldn't get out of bed for days, but she said nothing about her own daughter. And I think that alone said a lot about their family dynamic, that they're just very emotionally distant and out of touch with one another. And in a family like that, I think you either end up with a kid like Nikki, who grew up doing everything her parents said and literally married into the Rothschild family, or you end up with a Paris.
And that would explain why her parents sent her away when things got out of control. The Hiltons moved to New York City when Paris was 15, and she immediately embraced the nightlife and found her community in the party scene. Kathy and Richard Hilton grew tired and concerned with her partying and sent her away to 4 different programs to try and straighten her out.
One of the places she was sent to was the Ascent Wilderness Program in Idaho, which was a boot camp for troubled teens. One day, Paris and another girl tried to escape, but they were caught and then beaten in front of the other kids as a punishment. And I was shocked to learn things got even worse from there.
Yes, sadly, the most traumatizing thing happened to her 2 years later when she was 17. Because she ran away from the first 3 programs she was sent to, Paris's parents organized for her to go to Provo Canyon School in Utah. It's advertised as a psychiatric youth rehab center that offers accredited classes. But in reality, the school has an extensive history of abuse in every form: verbal, physical, and psychological. When parents agree to have their kids sent there, the school stages a kidnapping. 2 men are sent to forcibly remove the kids from their home in the middle of the night.
I had no idea until I watched this documentary, but Utah is like the mecca of the troubled teen industry. There are more than 100 youth treatment centers in the state, and one of them is actually the Turnabout Ranch, the place where Dr. Phil infamously sends all the troubled teens who've appeared on his TV show. Now, if any of you are familiar with Danielle Bergoli, aka bad baby, aka the cash me outside girl. Dr. Phil sent her there too when she was 13. And like Paris, she said she was kidnapped in the middle of the night and taken away. And also in February 2021, she spoke out about being sexually assaulted by an employee and witnessing other kids being abused.
Paris and Bad Baby both shared their stories as part of a social movement called Breaking Code Silence, which advocates for victims of institutional child abuse and raises awareness about the problems with the troubled teen industry. Some of Paris's old classmates at Provo Canyon School are activists for Breaking Code Silence and were able to reconnect with her through it.
So in the film, Paris said that in the 11 months she spent at Provo Canyon, she had to sit and stare at a wall all day with zero sunlight, zero fresh air, was forced to take medications that made her feel numb and exhausted, and she had zero privacy. The male employees would literally watch her while she showered or went to the bathroom. And toward the end of the documentary, we see Paris reconnect with the girls she went to school with, and they shared their own stories of forced drugging and sexual, emotional, and physical abuse.
Paris was also put into solitary confinement when one of the employees discovered that she'd been spitting out and hiding her pills. She was strip searched and put into isolation, completely naked and in the dark. Like, what? And back in university, I actually wrote a paper about solitary confinement and the negative effects that it has on prison inmates, and it was pretty interesting, and the list is pretty extensive. People who are placed in solitary confinement are more likely to experience things such as depression, anxiety, delusions, and even insomnia, and they're also likely to reoffend once they're released.
That makes me think of how Paris spent 23 hours a day in solitary confinement her first time in jail. Like, I just wonder what kind of toll that took on her mentally. So during her time at Provo Canyon School, she and her best friend would get through their days by planning their careers and dreaming of what they'd do as soon as they got out.
Her ambitions went beyond partying to make up for lost time, though. Paris apparently excelled in studying business and economics, and she said she wanted to be so successful that her parents couldn't control her anymore. She said, quote, "I saw success as freedom, and I just imagined this glamorous life." That mindset is what kept her going. She figured making a brand and a name for herself was a way to gain her control back.
Paris's quest for financial freedom led to the lifestyle she has now. She says it's tiring, but she won't stop working until she makes $1 billion. And that goal used to be smaller, but she hit that target a long time ago. Her sister calls her greedy, and Paris admits herself she's addicted to making money. But to me, that just looks like somebody who's afraid to confront her problems. Like, if you're raised to suppress your emotions and pain, you're always going to be seeking distractions instead of dealing with your internalized issues, whether that be by partying or overworking yourself.
Yes, definitely agree. And something that was very evident in the documentary is that despite having all this money and fame, she genuinely doesn't seem happy. The saying, "money can't buy happiness," definitely rings true here. The media has constantly painted Paris as being materialistic, but I think it goes deeper than that. She said herself that she loves to shop excessively because when she was sent away to those programs, she was stripped of everything that she had.
It kind of reminds me of the song Seven Rings by Ariana Grande. Not to derail the conversation here, but I remember seeing people critique the song because at face value, the lyrics are boasting about Ariana buying all these lavish things whenever she wants. But the song is actually about shopping being an unhealthy coping mechanism to deal with trauma.
I mean, how many of us have done some retail therapy when we're having a bad day?
Literally me in our first episode when I talked about getting yelled at by that scary man and then going to the mall to feel better.
It makes us happier, and it's been proven that retail therapy releases dopamine, which is the hormone that makes us happy, and it also reinforces a sense of control. And it's not surprising that shopping gave Paris the feeling of regaining control over her life.
What do you think of the fact her parents never knew about what she went through at Provo until the making of the documentary?
I'm really not sure that I believe that, to be honest. I mean, they were the ones who organized the whole thing, so wouldn't they have known what they were getting her into? I mean, if I had children, I would want to know what kind of place I'm sending them to.
I felt the same way. At the end of the documentary, too, where Paris was confiding in her mom, Kathy just sits there and you see her processing the regret. And she says she had no idea, but she also never once says that she's sorry. So this is what Alexandra Dean had to say about it. Paris had tried in her own way to tell them over the years, but she has such a hard time communicating it that it never landed. I think it can be very typical for families with a person who was the black sheep and who underwent trauma, that it can be hard for the rest of the family to accept. With the guilt involved and the pain involved, you don't want to hear it. I definitely know that Paris had the experience of her family not wanting to know about it, and I saw my parents do that with my sister. I am hesitant to condemn anyone in these situations because these things are so painful. I would say that children who suffer trauma get shut down by their families more often than they are heard, unfortunately. Maybe, in part, I want to make this film to challenge those families to listen to their children.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. I think that's part of their lives that will always be in the dark, and it's really sad. I mean, you hear Paris talk about how she never really had anyone to confide in and how she still has trust issues over 20 years later. I think she may have felt like she needed to pretend to be someone else after this to try and distance herself from her past and the pain, almost like a defense mechanism.
We also saw in the film how she's lost herself in her relationships by trying to find happiness in other people. She revealed she's been subjected to domestic abuse in several relationships.
Paris blames Provo Canyon School for making her believe that being grabbed, strangled, or yelled at by men was normal. She explains that every relationship started off the same with her not recognizing any red flags, but then after some time, her boyfriends would become jealous and possessive, and she just thought that meant that they loved and cared for her that much. Then again, she didn't know any better. The survivors she met with also talked about how their experiences at Provo Canyon taught them to confuse abuse with love.
So we got a glimpse into one of her relationships. At the time of filming, she was dating a German soccer player named Alex Novakovic. And she said she first noticed him because he was handsome and they hadn't spent too much time together in person because of their schedules. But in the documentary, we saw that he was able to join her for her DJ set at Tomorrowland, which is the biggest EDM festival in the world.
And he got super possessive. He clearly had too much to drink and was getting all up in Paris's face, complaining that she wasn't paying enough attention to him and carelessly dropping her DJ equipment. They had a screaming match that ended with her getting him kicked out of the grounds. Like, sir, she's playing the biggest festival of her life. Don't you think that you could put your self-entitlement and ego aside? It was so frustrating to watch personally.
Seriously.
And I think she handled the situation well, though. I mean, she clearly doesn't put up with any bullshit, and I respect her for that.
Apparently, she wanted to cut that entire scene from the documentary, but I think it's important to show, and I'm glad they kept it in, because Paris was able to recognize her self-worth, right? But some people never break out of cycles like that. So, what are your final thoughts after watching This Is Paris?
Personally, it really opened my eyes and made me see things through a different lens. You never really know what someone's going through or has gone through, and despite looking like they have it all.
Same, and I gained a lot of respect for her. I feel like every other series she's done was just PR fluff in comparison, but this came across as a lot more authentic. And I also really like now to pay attention to when she does or doesn't use the baby voice in interviews, because it's pretty interesting to notice what causes her to completely shut down and shut people out. So, for instance, she went on the Drew Barrymore show in 2020 to talk about the documentary and her trauma. And Drew, I mean, God bless her. I love Drew Barrymore, but she really should not have a talk show. In response to Paris's trauma and opening up, she said that she also got sent to a troubled teen program when she was about 12 or 13, but that it saved her life and she wouldn't change a thing. And so by the end of the interview, you see Paris just stop trying to explain herself. She switches into her fake voice and says, "You've definitely had the most fun and intimate interview so far. My favorite. Congratulations. This was so good."
Love the subtle shade there. Well, she did say in the documentary that she doesn't know if she'll ever be able to stop hiding behind a character, but it does seem like things have gotten better for her since then. During the press tour for the documentary in 2020, somebody asked Paris what was happening with her nightmares, and she said that they had actually stopped since they wrapped filming.
And as for her love life, in November 2021, she got married to an American entrepreneur named Carter Room. They filmed a TV series about the wedding called Paris in Love, which we actually have not watched, but apparently it left Paris's fans concerned for her because it didn't paint Carter in a positive light. But as far as we know right now, Paris has stated she's very happy and loves that he's business focused and out of the spotlight because to her, that means he's not using her for fame.
Yes, she definitely deserves her fairy tale ending. We really hope that Paris is doing well and that she's truly happy after everything that she's been through. Well, you know what? That seems like a good place to wrap up our episode. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we really hope you enjoyed this two-part series.
We'll be back in 2 weeks, but until then, make sure you connect with us at Naughty Girls Pod on Instagram for more fun content in the meantime. Bye!
Bye!